Hi, my name is Rhiannon. This is my first person account. The name of my story is Matthew, and it takes place 12 years ago. My parents waited until I was a teenager to officially untie the knot, and while you might think that being older when something like that happens made me more mature or emotionally equipped to handle such an event, in my case you would be mistaken. Before I knew it, my dad was remarried, and he and my stepmom had announced that they were expecting. I'm not proud of how I handled that news. I was angry and hurt and mainly jealous, but I think my biggest problem was that even though I was older, I had this really concrete notion of love as something that only went so far, and that you only had so much space in your life for the people that you cared about, and I didn't think I had room or need in my life of another person with my last name. Despite all this, about 6 months later, I ended up moving in with my dad and stepmom. After a short stint in college, I was pretty ambivalent about my future. I had no real ambition or goals. My roommate had gotten a grown-up job and moved to another city, and I couldn't afford to pay my rent. So I packed up all my stuff and I moved to Albuquerque from Texas and lived with my dad and stepmom. And while my stepmom and I have a great relationship now, and I really value her in my life, at the time, there was some tension. When my little brother was born, I was at the hospital. He was 4 pounds, several months premature. He was tiny and fragile, and one of my biggest regrets is that today he can see pictures of my face when somebody tried to hand him to me. And he'll think, I think he will believe that I didn't want him, and that I was maybe even disgusted by him. But in truth, I was absolutely terrified of this tiny, fragile, delicate person. And I was so insecure in myself that I just knew if I took him in my hands, I might hurt him or damage him. And that distance stayed between us for several months. I lived in the house, and I loved him, and he was cute, but I didn't really, I think, bond with him or connect with him. And I felt very much an outsider in my dad's house. I was working in a restaurant as a hostess, which was sort of depressing, to tell you the truth. If you've ever seen how mean, aggressive servers can be to a timid, inexperienced, and insecure hostess, it is National Geographic level mean sometimes. And I remember that I came home from work one day. It's just really one of those days that makes you sort of question, where your life is going. And I was really sad, and I felt really isolated, and I felt like nobody really needed me in their life. And I was sitting on the couch in the living room, and my dad and my stepmom and her parents and a few other people were in the kitchen, and I could hear them having a conversation, enjoying each other's company. And I was keeping an eye on my little brother. He was laying on a blanket, looking at a mobile toy above his face. And I was making sure he was okay, but that's about the extent of it. I was watching TV mainly, and he started fussing just a little bit. So I got down on my hands and knees, and I put my face over his face. And I know that babies smile at random things, and it probably didn't mean anything at the time. But he grinned up at me, and it was the first time that he had smiled at me. And he started to giggle. And I felt this enveloping sense of love and of kinship and of connection. And I suddenly felt so protective and so needful of this person in my life. And I'll never forget that instant feeling of somebody needing me and feeling that I needed him. And 12 years later, I still feel the same way. Like I said, 4 ounces when he was born. 4 pounds when he was born. Now he's 12 years old, and he's literally a foot taller than everyone else in his class. And he's gangly and awkward and sweet and affectionate. And I love him so much. My dad actually died a couple of years ago, and every time I look at my little brother, I see this connection that I never would have had to my family and to my past, and to my future. And it's something that I treasure, and that I'm just truly grateful to have. So this has been my story. It's not much, but thanks for listening. Hope you all have a great week.